All right, I think we're good to go. I wait a second to get confirmation from my colleagues that everything works fine. I'll wait a second and then we're going to get started. Yeah, hopefully everyone can see me, hear me, and the broadcast is good. This time we're using Zoom, unlike the other platform that we used to use. And sound and image good on all ends. Okay, excellent. And Lenka, my colleague, is overseas, very, very far away. And if she can hear us well, hopefully that's a good sign. So hi, everyone. And the very first thing, besides my brief intro, my name is Andras Panet, and today we're going to be talking about the ICT Assistants and Administrators EPSO exams. So the very first thing is that I encourage you to open and click on the chat button, because here you need to click on it specifically, depending on which device or screen you're using. Hopefully, once you clicked it, please give it a try. Tell me where you are dialing in from, so I can see that it works fine for everyone. All right, Nicoletta is the quickest from Italy. Spain works fine. Belgium. Excellent, a lot of Belgium, Ellie from Greece, Mara from Brussels, Maya from Luxembourg, Romania, all over the place. Excellent, excellent. World citizen, we've been a world citizen, that's excellent. The world is your home, Dario. All right, appreciate that. So everything seems to be working fine. Hopefully that stays that way until the end of the webinar. We are obviously recording this, and the recording will be made available. So a couple of words of housekeeping before we get started with the actual essence of today's discussion and today's presentation on this fascinating and amazing opportunity for ICT specialists. We're going to look at which subspecialties are available this time, but this competition is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, of recent years. This is an outstanding opportunity for everyone in the field to get into the EU institutions, to get a permanent job as a result of these competitions. So with that, a couple of points, the sound check, hopefully that works fine. If ever you have a concern, usually restarting your device or going to a different device would solve the problem. But after all, presumably all of you are IT experts, so you know this far better than I do. As an alternative, you can dial in. Zoom probably has a couple of phone numbers, but again, it's probably just using an alternative browser or device would solve the problem. So with that, my name is Andras Panet. I mentioned that before. You might know my work, the Ultimate EU Textbook, which has been in publication since 2000, not even 2005 actually. And with EU Training, I'm co-founder and partner and one of the members of the team, but certainly other extremely helpful, valuable, and appreciated members of the team are Lenke and Veronica, who are based in Budapest, and they are in the back helping to make sure everything runs very smoothly. So with that, in case you missed something, as mentioned before, you receive the recording after the event, and you're also going to receive the presentation slides. So you will have a chance to review everything I will cover in the next hour or so. And then within a week, we're going to make the transcript available so you can read that, you can go into details. Certainly a word of caveat or legal disclaimer that everything that I tell you is to the best of our knowledge, is based on official information and our almost 15 years of experience in the field, but it's not legally binding. So if ever there is any contradiction between my words and the official texts, then make sure that you consult the official texts. Typically, that would be the notice of competition as published on the EUR-Lex, so EUR-Lex.eu website. So with that, a few words about our company before we get into the essence and the substance of today's discussion. We have a huge community that has grown to over 100,000 candidates and those interested in EU jobs and EU careers. There are thousands of people who have become EU official, which we're very proud of, that we could contribute to their success, that they could get into the institutions. Many of them are even repeat customers because they got into one position, but they wanted to upgrade or change. and they participated in internal competitions or other. If you are on Facebook, you might want to check out the community. It's a pretty robust community, but we also have a lot of Facebook groups that you might want to join. There are several specifically for this competition or competitions as well. And then we have the test packages, over 25,000 tests in the multiple choice question database. Then we have over 17 million questions that have been used and test generated, and lots of webinars similar to the one we're having right now. But certainly we have a lot of workshop style webinars where it's more interactive. It's really a training kind. Those are available live. Those are available as recording. And then we have information sessions, webcasts, the one we're having right now. So a final word, or not even a final word, but perhaps a teaser. Towards the end, I'll be happy to share with you a special exclusive offer that you can use to get a special discount for a limited time on all of our digital packages and preparation materials. So with that, let's actually get into it. And I encourage you to put your questions into the chat box. I will do my best to answer as many questions as I can, and my colleagues will be helping me convey those on my secondary screen that I'm taking a quick look at from the corner of my eyes. If there are questions that I cannot answer during the webinar, we'll find a way to come back to it in due course. So we will find a way to put out a Q&A memo or something like that to make sure that no question is left unanswered. With that, there are two competitions that we're covering today. Essentially, they're almost the same, not exactly the same, but almost the same in terms of the expertise, in terms of the job profile that they, meaning the European Personnel Selection Office, EPSO, is seeking to evaluate. But there is certainly a big difference. One is AD, the other one is AST. So the AD is administrators on two levels, as we will see in a second. And the AST is a different job category with different levels of responsibility and certainly a different salary grade as well. Can you apply for both? Well, I would say if you qualify for the AD, then go for the AD. But if you don't, then I presume you can go for the AST. I'm asking my colleagues just to double check it because I don't know off the top of my head if that is excluded. One thing which is certainly excluded is that within the AD category, you can only pick one field. So that's for sure that when it comes to the AD, you need to pick one field out of 5 that are available. For the AST, you have 4 subcategories, and again, you can only apply for one. But in terms of AD versus AST, I'd need to double check it. But as far as I understand, and again, I get now confirmation, you can actually apply for both because these are separate competitions, right? So it's within a given competition that you need to make a choice, but not between these two. Before we get into the actual substance of it, a few words about the actual job opportunity and what does it look like. Where will you work? Well, Brussels or Luxembourg, as for most EU jobs. This could be part of the European Commission. It could be the European Court of Auditors. It could be other EU institutions that hire you, those that are based in Luxembourg or in Brussels. You could say Strasbourg, but Strasbourg is where the European Parliament meets for their plenary session, but it's not that you would be stationed in the beautiful city of Strasbourg, but it would be either of these two, or even perhaps beyond. So if EU institutions might assign you for jobs or tasks, it might even be another city, but this is the sort of the default of the jobs. Which institution? Well, any EU institution can hire you once you are on the so-called reserve list. And we'll talk a little bit about what the reserve list is and how to get on it. But in terms of the institution that can hire you in the end, basically any of the institutions you see on the screen, from the European Commission being the largest EU institution, the largest employer, all the way to the Committee of Regions or the European Court of Justice or others. So let's actually look at the application itself and look at the details of how you're going to be able to get one of these positions. So the first one we're going to look at is the AD, so the administrator level. So the reference number is the one you see on the screen, the 398/22, 22 denominating the year 2022, and the 398 is the reference number that will need to be used in all exchange correspondence with the institutions when you are searching information about this. So the official title is ICT, so Information and Communication Technology Experts, right? So the word expert here refers to the AD level competition. As we will see for the AST, it's going to be called assistants, right? So when we talk about the ICT experts, that refers to the AD level competition. So here you have these 5 subfields or specialties of sorts, and this is where you need to make your pick. So you can only go for one area within this particular competition. So within the AD, you can only go for one, where you have a lot of places. So, and just to put that in perspective, this is a huge competition, as I said before. Typically, you would not have so many available places on the reserve list in any particular competition. This is, I would say, unprecedented, but borderline unprecedented in a very positive sense. So overall, there, as far as I remember, if you add this up, it's like 350 places, which is really a great opportunity. Now, what are these? I'm not going to read them all out, but you'll probably you've probably seen it already, and you can kind of fit in to one or more categories that you see on the screen. So it could be all the way from infrastructure, cloud networks, all the way to data governance and digital workplace, all the way to ICT security. It's only the ICT security, which is AD8 level. What does that mean? Those who are not yet familiar with the EPSO lingo and terminology, basically the higher the number, the grade, the more responsibility you would have, and the higher salary you would be entitled to. That means the entry level, meaning having a university qualification, could get you an AD5 job. And when it's 86, 87, 88, all the way up to AD16, I believe, which is the Director General. So that's the #1 civil servant in any EU institution, Director General. That's the top level that you can potentially reach. And usually the principle is having at least 3 years of work experience to advance a grade. So from 87 to 88 would typically take 3 years and a good job performance to be promoted to that higher level. Now, importantly, these are all permanent jobs. Permanent in the sense that once you're given the contract, you are going to be able to stay in the institutions, provided you do a proper job. You can stay in the institutions pretty much until retirement. Now, you can take unpaid leave, you can quit. There are obviously different opportunities or possibilities. But again, the contract itself is not time limited. It's not that it's a 3-year, 5-year, or similar time-bound contract. So these are the different fields, and you need to pick one. So we're going to look at some of the qualifications that are required. But before that, let's look at the other pillar of this competition cycle, where you have the AST competition as well. So this one is the Information Communication Technology Assistants. So as you can see, the first one was labeled as experts, and this one is called assistants. So here you pretty much have almost the same 5, except for one. So you have basically 4 channels or specialties or sub-profiles that you can choose from. And again, if you go for the AST, you need to pick one. You cannot apply for the ICT security and at the same time apply for the infrastructure and cloud and networks and middleware, right? So you need to pick one depending on your eligibility, depending on your background, your profile, your work experience, which is pretty clearly defined. Now, one very important thing, obviously, is the deadline. You need to complete all of this by the 22nd of March. Okay, 22nd of March, you need to have that sent in and all confirmed, everything done online in your so-called EPSO profile. My usual piece of advice, never leave it to the last moment. And if anyone, you in the field know that servers can crash and servers can get overloaded and technical problems may occur. So do not leave it to the last moment. Send in your application a day or two before. We are going to offer quite a few preparation tools, materials, and webinars in the run-up to the application. And certainly for those who are invited to the assessment center, we're ready and available to provide coaching and training and preparation all the way. So one of the things that we're going to be offering, and we were just discussing with the team before this particular webinar, is to offer you a dedicated so-called talent screener preparation webinar. A talent screener is part of the application process, and I'll be hosting a live session on the 9th of March, and you're more than welcome to join that, where I'm going to guide you about the ins and outs of talent screener. Now, I went a little ahead of myself. I will discuss what the talent screener actually is and how you can make the most of it. But again, I just wanted to flag it that before you send in your application, and you might want to take our advice and our guidance, we're happy to offer that, and it's scheduled for the 9th of March. It's not yet available on the website, but it will be by Monday. So with that, are you eligible? This is the crucial, the fundamental question, because you need to prove certain formal parts or formal background to the selection board members that you meet all those formal criteria for the particular competition that you applied for. So what are the eligibility criteria? So certainly you have some general conditions. These are pretty straightforward and relatively easy to meet, as long as you hold an EU passport. So having a passport, or basically being a citizen of one of the EU's 27 member states, is a precondition. And you need to have completed your military service, which in some countries is still obligatory. I believe it's Greece, Austria, perhaps Spain. And then you need to meet the character requirements of the job. So you should not be a convicted felon, ideally, before you apply. So with that, what are the other formal criteria? There are certainly language requirements, and you have language 1 and language 2 for basically every EPSO competition. So what are the language rules for this particular one? Very straightforward. You need to pick a language 1 in which certain tests or certain parts of the selection process will be conducted. And language 1 can be any of the EU's 24 official languages. This is not related to your citizenship. So you could be a Spanish citizen and you could pick language 1, Finnish. Me, I'm Hungarian, I can pick language 1, English, or I could speak Swedish, but well, I don't speak Swedish, so I would not pick that. But again, theoretically, legally speaking, I could pick any of the 24. And it goes the other way around as well. So if you are a dual citizen, or you grew up with parents speaking Vietnamese, that's a great asset, but that's not a language you can pick. So it's not your mother tongue, but it's a language that you can choose from the 24 official EU languages. And then comes language 2, which must be English or French, and certainly different from language 1. So again, my own personal example would be me being a Hungarian and Belgian dual citizen. I can pick language 1, say Hungarian, and then language 2, English. Or I could pick language 1, French, and language 2, English, or the other way around, as long as these two are different and language 2 is either English or French. Our general piece of advice is pick a language too in which you can express yourself at the greatest ease, so that you are able to participate in a live interview, a structured competency-based interview, which is part of the assessment center tests, or a language in which you can write the best. And again, language one would be something where you can more passively manage in that particular language. So you understand it quickly, but not necessarily need to write or speak in that language. Okay, and with that, we can look at the specific requirements of eligibility, and I'm sure that you will have many questions. And I see from the corner of my eyes there are a lot of questions coming in the chat, but why don't I take a quick look already at some of the questions that my team has filtered for me, so I can answer those before I go on. So randomly, I'm going to pick a couple questions here. So when do I need to prove my job history if selected, or at the time I would apply? So there is the selection process, and you need to fill in a lot of information. And again, this is by declaration. Similarly to, soon we'll get to the talent screener. There again, you need to declare, fill out certain, I almost said paper, but certain formularies and questionnaires and website forms, but it's not something that you need to provide documentation about at this stage. So you will be asked about proof, or could be asked about proof, and usually at the very end of the process, or perhaps even at the time of actual hiring. So one thing I didn't mention yet, so EPSO, the European Personnel Selection Office, they select candidates. They don't recruit candidates, right? So what they do is they select based on all these formal criteria and the various tests that we're going to cover. They select a certain number of candidates, the one that you saw, those numbers you saw on the screen. And then once you are on this so-called reserve list and you are a laureate, that's when you can be recruited. And from that point on, one of the institutions can reach out to you, or you can proactively lobby and try to find a vacancy and then apply for that. And then they hire you. And it's often at that moment that they would ask for your formal papers and qualifications and all the rest. Now, if you, let's say, were not truthful, or there was some serious misdocumentation, for lack of a better word, well, that could cause problems, right? So you absolutely should be completely truthful in all your declarations. Now, when it comes to the actual work experience, what is relevant and what may not be less relevant, those are, again, declarations based on your truthful answers. And those are part of the formal part of your application, which you need to do now. And also the talent screener, which you also need to do now before the deadline. And then the selection board, the members are going to check those talent screeners, partly perhaps computer aided, but at least for now, humans are going to read those and say, okay, and I see again, transiting to another question saying, is electrical engineering a related area? They might say, well, when it comes to electrical engineering and it's ICT security, well, we consider that related area. It's close enough. And again, depending on what specific job experience you have on top of that formal qualification, they would say, okay, we award you enough points to consider you eligible to pass to the next stage, right? So these are, again, for declarations that you make. You don't need to send in all those documents, which we're not going to check. Those will come at a much later stage, but you need to provide all that information so they can evaluate whether your background, your job experience, and all the rest is relevant and you qualify for the competition. All right, can you apply if you are waiting to get the nationality in short term? That's a question I've never had before. Let me think it through. So my idea would be, you probably need to meet all the criteria at the moment of application. So if by the 22nd of March, you get your citizenship, which presuming based on your question, you don't have yet an EU citizenship, but it's in progress. If you get it by then, you qualify. If you don't, well, you can still try, but again, it might cause problems. And even if you get it a week or so later, again, formally speaking, if somebody cross-checks the dates and says, well, at the moment of application, you didn't meet the formal criteria, including one of the most important ones of being an EU citizen, you may be disqualified. And again, this is my understanding of the situation, but I hope for you that you're going to get the papers in time. All right, I see there are many other questions. I'll try to come back to those, but let me go ahead with the other slides. So with competition, so the AD competition, here is the approach. Here is what formal degree qualification you need to have, and then you need to have a certain number of years of work experience. And again, the work experience itself is split into two parts: general work experience and then specific work experience related to that particular field. So you can see that you need to have completed university degrees of at least 4 years in ICT and or related areas with a diploma. And I'm absolutely sure, and without even looking at the question, I presume many of these questions are addressing this strange wording of related area. So what would qualify as a related area? Now, I don't have a specific answer for that. So we saw here this specific example, electrical engineering. I would presume, yes, it's related enough because it's not ancient Greek history, but it's close enough to the ICT area. Or others about, I don't know, digital marketing, or somebody who's an ethical hacker, or someone who deals with cloud computing. And again, I don't know if these are, let's say, 4 years as 4-year studies, but there might be certain degrees and qualifications which are, again, broadly speaking, in that field. So that's why they probably they cannot give you a limited or specific list of all the areas that are related. It's pretty much on an ad hoc basis, in the sense that the subjects that you dealt with, the topics that you dealt with, are they close enough? And then they would judge it, evaluate that on a case-by-case basis. And then there's the other one. You could have also a bachelor's degree, basically. So 3 years, that's the lower box, where, again, 3 years in ICT or related area. And then the question is, how many years of work experience do you need to have? So if your studies were at least 4 years, then you need to have 6 years professional experience. And if your studies were 3 years, you need to have 7 years of work experience. So you see that it adds up to 10. So 4 plus 6 or 3 plus 7. A very important part of both is how many years have you spent working in a field or doing tasks which are specifically related to the topic of the competition, or to the subdomain, to the specialty that you have chosen. And probably that's going to be the determining factor for you as to which specialty you're going to pick out of the 5 for the AD competition, or out of the 4 for the AST competition. So if you spent at least 3 years in cloud computing, well, that's a clear indication for you which of the specialties you want to pick. If you spent as much time on cloud computing as you did on ICT security, well, you are in this wonderful position to pick and choose. And again, provided that you have the right number of years, because for the security, the ICT security, you need more experience, as we can see from the next slide, because that's field 5 and it's an 88 level. So there you need more time in the job. So again, the underlying degree, the same principle applies, 4 years or 3 years. And then the work experience is more, or the required work experience is more years. You can see 9 or 10. So altogether, this adds up to basically 13 years of degree plus work experience in total. And again, out of which you need to have spent 3 years or 4 years specifically in that particular domain. Now, in the annex of the notice of competition, you can see quite a detailed description of what each profile entails. So that gives you a better idea of what sort of tasks they are looking for, which again, at the beginning, you need to prove, so to say, that you need to declare and you need to provide good arguments how and why and in which context you actually worked on those kind of tasks or areas as listed in the annex of the notice of competition. And at any point later on, once you have completed the competition or you are being recruited, they can ask for proof. So that might be a declaration from your current or former employer. That could be some other way of proving that you actually did those tasks and you're not just claiming to have done those tasks. All right, AST. So principles are very similar for AST, where you have basically 4 fields. It's AST 4. So there is no distinction here, as we saw with the AD, where you had 87, 88. AST, which is the assistant level, it's AST 4. Maybe just one little footnote about the word assistant. It might be a little strange or misleading, or it brings up different connotation depending on where you're coming from. AST, I mean, assistant is not a clerical assistant, right? So this is not a secretary position. Assistant means that you have a lower level of responsibility with a matching salary, but it's certainly a substantive, real, actual work in that particular field. So this is different from AD in those respects, in those regards, but this is not administrative task. I mean, you do substantive work in that particular area, but again, usually it's not necessarily a semi-managerial position. This is more being responsible for certain tasks, but then you have a head of unit or someone more senior who would assign those project management tasks to you. So going back to this one, AST4, you have, again, the principles are very similar. So either 2 years of diploma which are related to the field, or you could have a secondary education diploma giving access to post-secondary education. So pretty much like a high school degree or in a specialized high school degree that you obtained. And then how many years of work experience are you required to have? Either 6 years or 9 years. So that depends on whether you have a post-secondary education, which again is not the same as university education, but it's post-secondary education. So it could be a dedicated course or a degree that you obtained, if it was at least 2 years, plus a certain number of work experience in the field. And again, there is this idea of having spent a certain number of years during that work experience, in this case, 3 out of 6, specifically related to the field. Or similar principle, 9 years of experience, of which you spent 3 years specifically on that domain. So I hope it makes sense, and I'll just pause here again for a second before preaching to the converted or the hopefully converted that this is a great opportunity. Let me take a couple of questions that you sent in. Are these posts also valid for the JRC? Those of you who are not familiar with the EU lingo, JRC is the Joint Research Center. Well, the JRC, institutionally speaking, is part of the European Commission. So it's the European Commission that would be the employing institution if you are to go to the Joint Research Center. So yes, technically, yes, you can end up in the JRC. And again, I don't know about the HR policies, whether this is truly a possibility or are they planning to assign anyone to the JRC. So JRC has premises in Ispra in Italy and in Sevilla in Spain, and these would be wonderful places to work at. Now, I don't know whether you really would be assigned to these locations, but again, JRC is also in Brussels, so that's part of the game. What if we have the experience in all the subfields, but not for one of them, for one profile. So for instance, imagine for the first profile, I have expertise in ICT infra, cloud, but not networks. Am I still eligible? Yes, presumably yes, because if you have specific work experience in most of those areas, right? Like what you did corresponds to the requirements, you seem eligible. But again, eligibility is just part of the overall game. What you need to do, and we'll get to that in a moment, is also fill out the talent screener. Now, a talent screener is a series of questions, and I'm going to describe it in a moment, where they ask exactly about this. So they say, do you have experience in infra? Okay, you do, wonderful, you get 2 points. Do you have experience with cloud? You have limited experience, you have some understanding of how that works, great, you get 1 point, but not the full potential 3 points. So let's say, so eligibility is sort of passing through a certain door, but it doesn't mean that you are fully in, because that's where they would ask questions and assign you scores depending on how relevant your work experience is to what they are looking for. And certainly the more boxes you can tick, the better, while obviously remaining truthful and honest. They will assign you points and then say, okay, comparatively speaking to other candidates who picked this particular field, you actually got more points. So, okay, you're going to advance to the next stage. Whereas if they say, well, we have here 200 people who tick all the boxes, they are cloud experts, they are security experts, they know everything about malwares and Cisco systems and God knows what. Well, in that case, they get more points, so they have a better chance of passing to the next phase. All right, what supporting documents would I need to provide in order to prove my experience? Could you provide some examples? I wish I could, but again, if you are asked, this is typically not a very, how should I put that? Not a completely formal way of proving it. Certainly the fact that you worked at a certain place or you were self-employed, and you can prove that through tax documents, or not about your tax declaration, but that your company was registered, and you say, well, this is the period during which I billed through this particular company. Or you can say, well, here is a declaration of honor that these were my clients and I did the following tasks for them. Or if you worked through certain platforms, and then you can have some track record that you can show. So again, it's formal, but it's hard to define what proof can you or should you file to them if and when they ask it. If you were an employee, that's usually easier, because then you probably have a job description, and especially if you work for a large organization, they probably would have the job profile, and then you can send it in. So all of these could be requested, or you could provide them as proof. But as I said before, it's not at this stage that you would be required to send these in. All right. This competition requires X years of study in ICT or related areas. What are related areas? I think I mentioned that before. I don't understand why AST and AD8 have the exact same requirements in terms of years of experience. Yeah, it's indeed a bit special. I agree with you. It probably, the main difference being is that you are probably required to have more, let's say, formal education in ICT on the AD8 level, whereas for AST, it's more that you have the practice in ICT, but not a formal education or underlying education. So you probably, even if you know the same thing, if not more, than someone who has a degree from MIT in Massachusetts, they make a distinction between having those underlying degrees or not. But again, almost the same number of years of work experience. All right, one more question before I move on. Having a Cambridge C2 from around 2013, is it still valid or does it need to be fresh? Very happy you asked this question because it refers to a language certificate, language exam, whether it's Cambridge or DELE or DALF or whatever language we're talking about and whatever certificate. The bottom line is you do not need any language certificate. So the linguistic knowledge, you need to have it, but you don't need a document about it. You don't need an exam about it. So it's basically by declaration, but you certainly need to have those linguistic and written communication skills because you need to apply them in the course of the competition. So if you have, let's say, this Cambridge exam, it really doesn't matter as long as you're able to perform at the required level in the case study or in the written test or in the competency-based interview or any other exam in the course of this competition. Yeah, so no language certificate or language exam is required. Why is it a good opportunity? Well, certainly there are a lot of great benefits, and salary is usually one of the key drivers. So to give you a rough idea how much money is in or what salary you can expect, well, on EU training on our website, we have a salary calculator, but we just discovered that actually AST4 is not in the simulation for some reason. So just give you a rough idea, that would be around 3,000 and 3,500 euros net per month. And again, roughly. So there are a couple of factors that you would need to think about, or they would consider whether you need to relocate to Brussels from another country or from further away, even in Belgium. Do you have kids? Are you married? All these factors come into play, and to some degree, the number of years of work experience that you have. But then again, it gives you a rough idea. And when it comes to AD7, AD8, this would be in the range of 5,500, perhaps a little more net euros per month. So these salaries are attractive salaries in usually everywhere in Europe, but by all means, good benefits with health insurance and access to European schools, and with the health insurance and related things. So and certainly there is a broader idea of working for the European institutions, working on interesting international projects, working in supporting the work of the institutions, whether it's internal software or internal issues or external facing applications and sites and projects. So all of this is often a great motivator for most civil servants or to-be civil servants. How to get one of these jobs? So I've already said a fair bit, but let's take a quick look at a couple of other points. So step one, we covered it quite a bit by now with the eligibility declaration and languages and the application, and do not miss the deadline. And then comes the famous or infamous talent screener, which I already mentioned a few times. So all of this needs to be validated by the deadline. But let's take a closer look at what the talent screener actually is. So the talent screener, it's a series of questions, an online questionnaire, pretty much like a Google form or Survey Monkey form that all of us have probably seen by now. But it's on the EPSO application website that you need to fill in to the best of your abilities. And I say the best of your abilities because it will be the major determinant whether or not you can proceed to the next stage of the competition. How is it scored? It's a series of questions. Typically, you can get 0 to 3 points per question. And these are open questions, usually open-ended questions. It's not like multiple choice. It's not a test in a classic sense. It's basically almost like a structured CV and motivation letter, a special mix of these two formats where you need to provide declarations about your work experience, about your background, about your expertise in a given field, and do it in a way that the assessors are going to get a clear idea that your profile is relevant to the competition that you qualify, and you basically meet all the criteria you need to be eligible. And comparatively speaking, you are more suitable and your profile is more relevant than the person behind you. So this way you're going to get certain scores. And again, depends on how many questions there are going to be. You can get a certain number of points. Usually there are, say, 10 questions. So 10 times 3, 30 points. And then they do a ranking based on how many points you were given. The way it's scored, usually 2 persons would score independently of each other. So they try to minimize the subjectivity. And again, we heard rumors that given the workload and logistics, this might be changed and only 1 person might score it, which I personally don't think is a good idea, given the very reason I just mentioned, so subjectivity. But then again, hoping that in terms of due process, they will keep the current system with 2 assessors, evaluators. And then if there's a big discrepancy between the points that they awarded you, then a 3rd person will also take a look. And all of this anonymously, so they wouldn't know who you are, only the declarations that you made. Now, how do you maximize your score? And this question, you might say, well, how can I even maximize it? It's an ethical question. I believe it's very much an ethical question, because I've seen a lot of great professionals, not just in ICT, obviously, but nuclear scientists and competition lawyers and agriculture experts who are great experts. They know a lot. They have a great track record. And yet, when it comes to the talent screener, they are just really punching below their weight. They are not optimizing the way they present themselves in a way that they would come across as the professionals that they are. So a couple of tips so you can optimize your talent screener replies and responses. So if it's a question, do you have experience in so-and-so area? Again, being truthful, you could, if you can, and if that's something that you've done, try to answer yes to as many questions as you can, while again, being honest in your declarations. And once you've done that, you need to provide a lot of valuable proof points. You need to provide information and meaningful answers to really demonstrate that you worked on this particular project and this angle required your understanding of those aspects of phone networking and digital workplace and all the other things that they are looking for. You need to be very concrete in your answers. You cannot just say, I've worked on high-scale projects with significant budgets, including multiple stakeholders and countries. That's a very abstract answer. You need to provide numbers, figures, data, and need to be as concrete as you can in those declarations. And even if some questions may resemble one another, and you think, oh, this is kind of like a duplication, it's a repetition of question number 2 and now we're question number 8, I just copy paste my reply. I advise you against that. I suggest that you actually make sure that each of your answers is relevant to the question, and you try to perhaps even present the same thing, but from a different angle. So to say, one question refers more to the actual programming languages that you have learned, and the other one talks about the technologies that you have acquired or that you are familiar with. And again, that might be slightly different, and you want to make sure that you give those proper answers. And then comes a lot of my advice is about clear writing. So about presenting that information in a way that is easy for the assessor to process it very quickly. So really structure and bullet points and references, and make sure the visual layout helps them to process the information quickly. And then generally speaking, so institutions, EPSO, they are quite formal, right? So the language, the way, the terminology that they require is somewhat unique. So make sure you read the actual terms and words and jargon that they put into the notice of competition, into the annex, and you use that terminology to reflect that you are familiar with what they are looking for. You can also look at a couple of commission websites, like there's the commission department called Digit. So that's the digital, I think it's digital infrastructure. That's what it's abbreviated of. So that's for the internal IT needs of the Commission and the EU institutions. So look at their annual report, look at their just the website and their activities, get a bit familiar with the kind of systems that they have in place, so you can, to some degree, reflect it back in your talent screener answers. And then also think about, it's more of a marketing approach, but think about what's in it for them, how your knowledge and your experience can be helpful inside the EU institutions. And if you can make that bridge and say, well, my understanding of large-scale network systems and how they can be secured against third-party attacks can be helpful for the institutions that handle a lot of confidential data, and I can use that expertise to the benefit of the institutions. So make that connection between what you know and what they are looking for. And then again, as I mentioned before, so the 9th of March, I'll be running a live talent screener workshop, webinar. You're welcome to join that. We're going to make it public in a couple of days. If you are watching this as a recording in a couple of days, it may be already online. So that is a webinar, interactive, and we'll probably suggest that I might take a couple of talent screener, anonymized talent screener draft replies and give my view on that. And by the way, we also have a service at EU Training that if you would like your talent screener replies to be reviewed before you submit it, and we provide our opinion about it, then that's a service that we offer that you might want to check it out. And I have some excellent colleagues and members of our team who can do that. And they've seen hundreds, if not thousands, of talent screeners over the years. And they can say, okay, here's how I suggest that you restructure it, you reformulate it. And certainly it's all in your hands, and you're going to be the master of your talent screener replies. But we're happy to give you our professional view and assessment on that. This is a paid service. You might want to check it out. And this is certainly available before the deadline is up. So with that, actually, we have here this one with the talent screener review. That's when many candidates might ask, is there also a computer-based test? So those of you who are more familiar with the EPSO system, others might be totally new to it. Typically, there is a computer-based test at this so-called pre-selection phase. So there is an abstract verbal numerical reasoning test, which they often apply or often require candidates to pass already at the pre-selection stage. Now, that's the reason why we said that there is no such thing at the pre-selection stage. It's only once the talent screener has been reviewed that you would pass to the next stage, and only there in the so-called assessment center phase will you be required to sit a so-called CBT test, so computer-based test, multiple choice psychometric tests. So the assessment center phase, it happens in language 1 and 2, and it usually, or at least these past 2 years during the pandemic, it was typically happening online. Part of it might happen in person. There are certain test or exam centers around the world that EPSO has been working with. So you might need to go to the so-called test center in the capital, the country in which you're based, but it might be in Brussels. So again, at this point, it's a little uncertain. We will see how it's going to look like or where it's going to take place, but chances are many of the assessment center tests will happen online. Now, how many people are actually going to be invited? So this we know roughly 3 times the number of places on the reserve list. So if you do the math, it's roughly 1,500-ish for the 2 competitions combined. So you have around 350. Actually, it's more, right? Oh, roughly that. 350 for the AD and about 204 for the AST. You multiply these by 3, and that's how many people will pass to the assessment center phase, roughly. So that means that the talent screener is the primary tool through which you're going to be filtered and the candidates are going to be ranked against one another. And then the number I just mentioned, that's how many candidates will actually be invited to the assessment center to sit those particular tests. What are those particular tests? You have computer-based multiple choice tests, the one I just mentioned, the abstract verbal numerical reasoning tests, which are typically referred to as psychometric tests. So we have thousands and thousands of these. Good news is we have actually verbal reasoning tests in all 24 EU official languages. So whether you speak Maltese, Irish, Lithuanian, Swedish, Portuguese, Spanish, Bulgarian, any of these languages, we have verbal reasoning tests for you, so you can practice it with us. The verbal reasoning well, all three are time limited. So you have a set number of minutes. In this case, for the verbal, you have 35 minutes and you have 20 questions. And it's a logical test. It's a reasoning test where you need to think about what you've read and then make logical deductions and then find the correct answer out of usually 4 options. Numerical reasoning, same idea. There you have 10 questions in 20 minutes. You have charts and certain figures and numbers, and then you need to make estimation, calculation, and then pick the right answer. It's a multiple choice test. It's not that you need to type in your answer. You pick one answer that you think is the most relevant. Abstract reasoning is, again, this, well, abstract charts and figures that have some inherent logic in them, and you need to find the next one in the sequence. This is typically the most difficult one for most candidates because you have 10 questions and 10 minutes. But the good news is that for this particular competition, the way they score it is pass mark is enough. So they add up all the points that you got, total possible is 40 points, and you need to have 20 out of 40. So if you get 0 on the abstract reasoning, you can still fairly easily pass based on the verbal and the numerical reasoning. Now, you certainly don't want to risk it. You want to make sure that you get across this hurdle, but this is relatively easy given the scoring system, the way they did it, right? And importantly, the CBT, so the abstract verbal numerical scores, are not part of your overall assessment center scores. So this is a hurdle that you need to pass, but nothing more than that. And then you have the assessment center tasks, which are in language 2, hence my earlier comment that you need to pick a language 2 in which you can express yourself at the greatest ease, case study exam, and then you have a situational competency-based interview, the SCBI. And we also have, on EU training, we have case study. So we have the interface, we have the simulation, we even have our experts who provide a feedback, a personalized feedback, if you wish, on your case study and send it to you within a couple of days. And then we have the SCBI, where we have our professional coaches and trainers who run live sessions where you simulate this. And again, you get personalized feedback. And certainly there's a lot of material. You can find ebooks and tips and tricks, all of which is free on our website. And I've done multiple webinars with my colleague Jan and Anna and a couple of others on this one. So then there is one last part, which is the field-related interview, where, again, it's an interview where they ask very specifically about your field. This is broadly, largely based on the talent screener, but then again, it's a discussion, it's an interview to evaluate your knowledge in that particular field of the competition. The way it's scored, the assessment center, you get certain points based on certain criteria. So you have certain competencies that they are measuring, and those are, broadly speaking, your skills, your competencies, plus they will check your knowledge in the particular field. And then similarly for the AST and the AD, the principle is pretty much the same, with one difference that for ADs, there is one more competency that they are measuring, and that's leadership, which is not the same as management skills, but it's leadership. And that's something that we discuss in certain webinars that you can also find on the website. So here's the quick summary of the scoring, and I know there are many questions still coming in. and I'm about to finish this part. We'll spend an extra 5 minutes or so on the questions. And if everything goes good, and why wouldn't it, you end up on the reserve list. So you have those set number of places, which indicates the chances of your success, also in light of how many candidates there are. Then the reserve list has a certain validity, usually 1 year, but it can be extended. And at one point comes recruitment, where you are actually hired in the institutions. So how do you get this? You practice a lot, because you want to make sure you understand the process and the substance of it. Maybe it's 1 hour per day or 10 hours per week, but its consistency is the most important. And that you learn the test methodology, because there's a way to optimize your performance, like in everything. And we have a huge number of materials on the website, as I mentioned, and we're happy to help you. Send a message to our team, to the customer support. We're happy to guide you to the right resources. And being persistent and lots of simulation is really the way to get to your goal. So please come to EU training, and you are certainly familiar as you registered with us. Check out those resources. We have those simulated practice tests. We have all the webinars, a large number of them free. Certain others are paid, live or recorded. And we even have a math refresher, though I guess in this particular field, you are more mathematically inclined. And then lots of other free resources with demo tests and virtual training and free ebooks and all the rest. So while I'll answer a couple of questions, there's a Facebook community that I mentioned. I will leave the special discount code on the page as promised, and I'm going to take a quick look at the questions that have come in. So is mechanical engineering, can it be considered a related area? I wish I could answer that. Possibly, but honestly, I wouldn't dare to say yes or no. Again, I'm not that familiar with mechanical engineering and how that might relate to ICT. So wish I could tell you. I'd rather pass on that. Is it better to describe more years of experience, like 15 years, or better describe the 6 years required? I don't see any problem or any risk you being really truthful and saying I have 16 years or 15 years of work experience, and instead of just kind of playing it down. So yeah, if you have that many years of work experience, fine. It's not going to disadvantage you in any way. They will see that you certainly meet the formal criteria. So, and anyways, at one point, you will need to just demonstrate or provide the right documentation about your work experience. So just declare that. What are the salaries? I think I answered that earlier. How long do you stay on the reserve list? Well, it's not that how long you stay. You stay there, well, forever, so to say. You are on the reserve list as long as the reserve list itself is valid. And I mentioned before, typically it's a 1 year validity. But if they see that a lot of people may not have been recruited within that year, which is quite unlikely, but who knows, then they might extend the validity of the reserve list. So you will still be recruitable from that particular list. All right, work as an IT support assistant under ICT contractor for 2 years directly at the Commission Embassy. Does it count as my selection opportunity? If you mean that, if it seems to qualify you for maybe the assistant profile, based on what you mentioned here, it seems to me yes. But then again, without knowing all the details of your particular situation. What happens if I'm involved in more tasks than those described in my job description? How can I prove them? Well, I'd say in the talent screener, you certainly, I encourage you to declare all of those, right? So the assumption is, or the presumption, so to say, is that you make truthful declarations. So if you really did more tasks than, strictly speaking, what's in your formal job description, I'd encourage you to make sure you document that in the talent screener. And if you have a way, maybe just a declaration from your employer, or later on, if you are specifically asked about those, again, you can just say a declaration on honor that you did that. But if you actually demonstrate the work that you did, there is some screenshots or specific task or any other way that you can show it, the better. But more often than not, once you meet these formal criteria, it's really that you demonstrate that knowledge through the talent screener and in the interview in the field, that they really see that you know what you're talking about. All right, if my degree is from a non-EU country, am I still eligible? Typically, you would need to get an equivalence. So to have some European, like usually Ministry of Education of the country of your citizenship, or sometimes the country of your residence can do that. Probably it's a good idea to have that sort of equivalence or some sort of matching of that. What is it? A homologation, I think that's the technical term, to make sure, because otherwise, in some degrees might be hard to tell, especially if it's, let's say, in Cyrillic alphabet or Arabic or any other. It may not be clear to anyone reading it to say, okay, what exactly did you study? Is it truly comparable to a European bachelor or master's? I heard that EPSO is changing approach in the selection process. Does it affect this competition? It is indeed true that EPSO is under a lot of, they are discussing and more than just discussing, probably deploying soon quite a few changes to the process. Notably that in some competitions, they want to bring back EU knowledge tests, but this particular competition is what there is. So what I've covered, what I've described, what there is in the notice of competition, that's what it is. So they're not going to add to it anything and not going to take away anything. Though I put a little footnote taking away, they just slightly adapted an earlier competition because of the pandemic and because of other logistical reasons. But this seems to be, let's say, COVID compliant notice of competition. So they already know how they can organize their selection process in light of the travel constraints and other constraints. So I think this is not going to change in any way whatsoever. All right, maybe one more minute, and in respect of everyone's time, we'll stop there. But again, as I said, we'll answer all these questions. So we will collect them in a document, make sure that you receive it, whatever I could not answer live. How long do you think the review of the talent screener would take? 2 to 3 months or more? Very good question. And again, I wish I knew, but let me share my educated guess with you. So if a lot depends on obviously how many candidates there are going to be. So as we could see from these numbers, it's a big competition. Roughly 1,500-ish people will or are planned to be invited to the assessment center. So if you think about this, and we assume that there will be far more candidates than that, which is likely, let's say 4,000, 5,000 or so. Now, scoring that amount of talent screener, that takes quite some resources. Now, as I said before, EPSO might be experimenting with some AI-assisted text recognition software and whatnot, but I presume they will still have the very humans, the assessors, the evaluators, to read those. And I think also for legal reasons, they might be required to have those humans, at least at this point. So that will certainly take time. Whether it's 2 to 3 months, easily, but it could be even more. And again, depending on how many candidates there are. So it can extend way into early summer, perhaps even after summer, that they would tell you whether or not you passed to the assessment center. And that's when they might start actually launching the assessment center exams. With that, I will not hold you back from your lunch break if you are in continental European time zones. So I very much appreciate all of you being here for the questions and all the rest. I know that there are many more things I have not yet answered, but we'll do our best to follow up as promised. Make good use of the discount, which I hope will benefit you in your preparation tools and the resources. If you have questions, then feel free to send us, and our team will be happy to come back to you and try to point you to the right direction or answer to the best of our abilities. And I wish you good luck. I mean, this is really such a wonderful opportunity. This is the chances are very high of getting in, because relatively speaking, there are a lot of vacancies, or not vacancies at this point, but a lot of places on the reserve list. So you are much encouraged to take good advantage of all of this, and I wish you luck. And then hopefully I'll see some of you at the webinar on the 9th of March. And we are also thinking about how we can be most helpful to assist in your preparation. So with this, thank you for participating. And here's our support email address, but you can find us on eutraining.eu, and you can get in touch at any time and browse around, check those resources out. And a big thank you to Lenke and Veronica for putting all of this together. Much, much appreciated, and everyone else who helped make this webinar technically and hopefully in substance a success. So with that, thanks again, and to be continued.